Hey, welcome back everyone to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 911. Black Politics. Please hit the like button to come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. I'm here with my co-hosts and facilitators, Man of Tomorrow and Renaissance Man.
What's going on, man? Let's get at it.
Hey, welcome back, everyone.
Soon to be joined by Nagone 11. What I wanted to cover today was Bernie Sanders' interview with the New York Times on their podcast, trying to clear up the statements that he made about post-election analysis as to why Democrats lost the race. So let's play this and then we'll give our analysis and then close thoughts.
It's Friday, November 15th.
Hello?
Senator Sanders.
Yes.
Michael Barbaro.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
Very well. I reached Senator Sanders inside his office on Capitol Hill on Thursday morning. You may not remember this, but the last time you and I spoke was back in 2020. We were in the same room, and we were working on a profile of you focused on your earliest days in public office as mayor of Burlington.
Oh.
It's not as vivid a memory for you, apparently, as it is for me.
Was it a good story?
I thought it was a good story. We had our moments, you and I, in that interview, and we don't need to reconstruct the whole thing, but there was a pointed moment where you were frustrated with something I asked. You almost got up and left, but then you decided to stay.
All right, let's do better this time.
Moving on. I just want to begin, Senator, by asking for your reaction to the news of the past 24 hours that Republicans have taken control of the House, because what that means is that Republicans now control both chambers and the White House. You are about to be in the minority as President-elect Trump brings a very aggressive agenda to Congress, an agenda, frankly, that Democrats have called, among other things, a threat to democracy. So how are you processing that?
Well, obviously, our job is to rally the American people, to make it clear, especially to working people, that we need an economy and a government that works for all, to expose as best we can what Trump and his administration are doing. But it's not just an inside the Beltway game. It's a question of rallying the American people to fight back effectively.
So you're in a fighting mood?
Oh, absolutely. I think right now this is a pivotal moment in American history. And the next year or two will determine what happens in this country for decades, in my view.
Fighting mood or not, are there any areas where you are prepared to work with the president-elect?
Absolutely.
And what might those be?
If Trump, for example, follows through on his proposal to limit interest rates on credit cards to 10%, which is what he campaigned on, absolutely, I will be there. I think that's a very good idea. I think it's time we told the people on Wall Street they cannot charge desperate working-class people who can't have a hard time paying their bills 25, 30, 40% interest rates. That's usurious. That's immoral. And if Trump wants to impose a credit card limit on interest rates, I'll be there.
So where your vision of championing the working class overlaps with his, you may back his agenda.
If he comes up with reasonable ideas, yes, I would be interested in working with him.
Let's turn to what I think is going to be the heart of this conversation, Senator Sanders, which is the effort underway across the Democratic Party, and you're a big part of it, of reckoning with the meaning of the outcome of this election. And understanding not just why Kamala Harris didn't win, but why Donald Trump in victory expanded his electoral reach into communities of color, into America's youth, into blue state America, including your own home state of Vermont, where when you look at the New York Times graphic, you see those red arrows suggesting his support deepened since he last ran. Donald Trump has created the most racially and politically diverse coalition of any Republican in a generation. And you have participated, as I said, in the postmortem underway across the Democratic Party. And I just want to read something you have said that a lot of people, when they read it, found very bracing. This is what you said. Quote, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that working class people have abandoned them." And you went on to say, first, this abandonment was among white working class Americans. Now, it is Latino and black workers as well. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and they want change, and they're right. I want you to just explain what you mean and be very specific, if you can, when you say that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class. When and how did the Democratic Party abandon the working class?
Well, it's something that's been going on for decades, including disastrous trade policies pushed by Bill Clinton.
You're talking about NAFTA.
Yeah, that's right. The reality is the American people, well, many of them, are angry.
Wait, Mike,
and they have every...
This is one thing that I don't get why Bernie is pushing this.
Me neither.
Go back and pull up the vote for NAFTA. The majority of Democrats in both the House and the Senate voted against it. The majority of Republicans, House and
Voted
Senate,
for both of them.
voted for it. Like this idea that NAFTA was the beginning of somehow Democrats. I'm not sure. Yeah, obviously you're gonna have a split in the party. Some people are gonna vote for it because of where they're from, but the majority in both chambers of Congress voted against it. So I don't see how this falls on Democrats and no one has, and that's a justification to go vote for Republicans.
But the thing here is, the people who are voting now don't even remember NAFTA.
Don't even care.
Well, not just that they don't care, but they don't even, because you're talking about 18 to 25-year-olds, 25 to 35, 35 to 45. They don't remember NAFTA. They weren't working back then. So
You
how
were
would
born.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
if you're
born.
a Zennial, yeah, you weren't born. But the millennials and the Gen Xers, that didn't impact that. They weren't a part of that working demographic of people. So who is he even talking to? He's talking about the boomers. But boomers have largely been supporting Democrats the whole entire time. So what are you talking about?
And it's like once the Republicans came in charge, it's not like they got rid of them.
Yeah.
Actually, George W. Bush gave tax breaks for companies outsourcing jobs overseas. And it's like, how do we still have this idea about NAFTA years later? And I had to show somebody a couple of months ago the vote. And he was like, well, if that's the case, then why do they keep saying it? I'm like, it's on you to know that this stuff is false, not for them to tell you that it's wrong.
Reason to be angry. Today in America, and sometimes, some of the elite does not understand this. Today in America, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. I understand the stress involved in that. It means that if your car breaks down, you don't know how you get to work. If you get sick, you don't know whether or not you can afford to go to a doctor. If your landlord raises rent by 20%, you don't know where you're going to live, where your kid is going to go to school. That's the reality facing 60% of the American people. Meanwhile, the very wealthiest people in this country have never, ever had it so good. That's a reality. So what happened in this campaign is Donald Trump said to the American people, you're angry, you're really pissed off, and I know that, and you're right. And then he gave his explanation. And his explanation, which was obviously nonsense and false and racist, etc., was that millions and millions of undocumented people were coming across the border, they were invading America, we're an occupied country, they were taking your jobs, taking your benefits, eating your cats and your dogs. That is why you are hurting. Now, that is a crazy explanation, but it is an explanation. Now you tell me what the Democratic explanation was.
Well, please explore that.
Well, wait a second here.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why the wealthy was walking away richer and richer is because of that 2018 tax cut. But that was passed by Republicans in Trump's administration. Why is that not brought up? You mean to tell me that? Well, I'm not even going to go into it because I don't know why Senator Sanders would even say all these type of things, man. It's just, I know he's sober because it's early in the morning, so.
So, so they can keep booking them on. Okay, so you start something and then you have to go to all these places because these are probably paid spots, right? Like you don't go on for free. And it's just another way of just keeping them being part of the conversation. For what reason, I have no idea. There's really no real reason for him to even have said that in the first place. Being wrong about NAFTA, not bringing up what happened during the Bush administration, acting like Barack Obama actually did nothing. And it's like, it's so easy. Democrats clean up after Republicans. It's really easy. It's really not that hard.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, Mike, the reason I think that they are doing this is I think they're trying to get out in front of the narrative. Because, it's him, Chris Murphy, they've both come out and basically said, hey, Democrats abandoning the working class, that's what we lost. I think what they're trying to do is, I think they know that the narrative that they're trying to get in front of the narrative, because traditionally when Dems lose, they blame the left and they want to shift right. So I think that's what they're trying to avoid, is trying to get out there ahead of it, because Bernie played a key role in the Biden administration. He had the ear of the president, very much so than in other administrations. So I think that's the other thing they're trying to avoid is the backlash, because you can already hear people like James Carville and other people in the party saying that the party needs to move right, it's too woke. I've already heard people saying, hey, they need to nominate Andy Bashir in 2028, which I'm not completely opposed to, but it's this rightward shift, and I think they're trying to combat that before the narrative gets away.
Map this critique onto the Democratic campaign and its shortcomings.
Well, the Democratic explanation was, hey, we have passed some good things, very important things in the Biden administration, which happens to be true. Biden kept his word. He was the most progressive president on domestic issues since FDR. We did a lot of good things. But instead of saying, yeah, we are rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, we're lowering the cost of prescription drugs, we are transforming our energy system, we forgave student debt for 5 million people, we're making some progress. But we have a long, long way to go.
Wait, can I just pause you? Because I think I'm not certain I'm understanding something. Where did the campaign of Kamala Harris go wrong if it was working with what you're describing as the building blocks of a successful policy agenda? And I know that you've said many times.
It's not just Kamala Harris. It's the Democrat. In other words, let me read you something, if I might.
Please.
What I think is one of the most interesting speeches ever given. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's inaugural speech in 1936, middle of the Depression. So he starts his speech, he says, look, these are the things we did, these are the obstacles that we had to overcome. And then he says, after being president for 4 years, he says, and I quote, I see millions of families trying to live on income so meager that the pall of family disaster hangs over them day by day. I see millions denied education, recreation, and the opportunity to better their lot and the lot of their children. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished, end quote. In other words, what Roosevelt did, he said, look, we're making progress. But I look out all over this country and I see tens of millions of people who are hurting. Instead of doing that, when the Democrats said, well, we passed the Inflation Adjustment Act and the economy is pretty good, and Donald Trump's a bad guy, and we all defend the woman's constitutional right to an abortion. There was no appreciation of the struggling and the suffering of millions and millions of working class people. And unless you recognize that reality and have a vision of how you get out of that, I think you're not going to be going very far as a political party.
You're saying that the party in this last election
I don't think people realize, this is why I can't get this narrative of because Bernie basically said, hey, economic anxiety in 2016 with Trump, and it's like, okay, Biden comes in, there's a pandemic raging, people are losing their life, Trump's not handling it. He got that back on track. Like you said, passed the Inflation Reduction Act, gave people an additional stimulus check, but hey, people run around, Trump gave me a stimulus check, so I'm voting for him. Passed the CHIPS Act, passed the Green New Deal, passed the infrastructure bill. It's like they passed all this legislation. You got stock markets hitting record high, and people are saying, oh well, the price of eggs are too high, so I'm upset, so I'm voting for I'm voting for Trump. Really what happened here, unfortunately, while I do agree that that was what was needed in America, I think once again Bernie's populist message is kind of fallen flat in the sense of, people said, hey, I don't want this black woman, being the president, and it basically came up with excuses. Biden was too old. You had the media, which basically normalized Trump for all the crazy stuff he was doing. Yep. I mean, because if you just, like I said, people are going to look back on this presidency and they are literally in 10 years going to be like, oh, dang, that was literally probably the most successful presidency we've seen in our lifetime. And it's just going to make this look even more foolish. The fact that, this guy wasn't given a second student loan forgiveness. I mean, they did. Oh, the other thing, they did the National Labor Relations Board. They literally proposed a rule that if you made under $46,000 or something like that, if you worked if you got overtime, they had to pay you. If you make less than that, and it was gonna go up this year, to almost 60 something.
Yep.
All sorts of stuff. Save the pensions of union workers.
Teamsters.
Yeah. Walk the picket lines. So I'm just like, how are you gonna say the party, walked away from the working class and didn't do that? And then the other thing is too, if you look at down ballot, Dems actually did pretty well. You had a clean sweep of Dems in North Carolina. Yeah. Same thing with other swing states with the senators.
Presidents.
Yeah, you got two black women to the Senate for the first time. Let's look at it to bring up your point, Renaissance. Here it is right here. The White House fact sheet: the Biden-Harris administration advances equity and opportunity for black people and communities across the country. Zoom in on this. From the first day in office and every day since, the Biden-Harris administration has taken an historic approach to advancing racial equity, including directing every agency across the whole of the federal government to address the lasting impacts of systemic racism on black communities for generations. Entrenched disparities in our society and economy, at times facilitated by the federal government, have made it harder for black Americans to have a fair shot at the American dream. Centuries of injustice and decades of disinvestment in black communities not only undermine the American promise of equal opportunity, but also keep our entire nation from reaching its potentials. After just 1 year in office, the administration has delivered real and lasting change and continues to work each day to deliver equitable outcomes and opportunity for Black Americans, economic opportunity for Black families and communities by signing into law the historic American Rescue Plan and bipartisan infrastructure law and implementing robust regulatory reform. President Biden has helped create new economic opportunities for Black Americans and made long overdue investments in Black communities. These transformative policies and programs include several providing immediate relief to Black people and families through the American Rescue Plan, leveraging federal procurement to narrow the racial wealth gap for Black entrepreneurs and families, ensuring Black homeowners get full value for their homes. This is just a couple of them, but the thing here is these are all working class initiatives that were done under Biden. And to say that, the party didn't push this, that it forgot about the working class, I don't know, Senator Sanders. I have to beg to differ. Here's one more here. The bipartisan infrastructure deal, he mentioned that, but today Congress passed the bipartisan infrastructure deal, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a once-in-a-generation investment in our nation's infrastructure and competitiveness. For far too long, Washington policymakers have celebrated quote-unquote infrastructure week without ever agreeing to build infrastructure. The president promised to work across the aisle to deliver results and rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. After the president put forward his plan to do exactly that and then negotiated a deal with members of Congress from both parties, this historic legislation is moving to his desk for signature. So, deliver clean water to all American families, eliminate the nation's lead service lines, ensure every American has access to reliable high-speed internet, improve transportation options for millions of Americans, reduce greenhouse emissions. I'm not going to read all of this, but this is just the fact sheet, okay? Why Senator Sanders isn't bringing up all of these sort of things as what the administration had already done as a means to discuss what the working class was, I don't know. This is the Chips and Science Act. That's one. The Biden administration advances equity and opportunity for Black Americans and communities across the country. President Biden announces new workforce hubs to train and connect American workers to good jobs created by the president's Investing in America agenda. Today, President Biden will announce 4 new workforce hubs to ensure all Americans can access the good jobs created by the president's Investing in America agenda, which includes the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Chips and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. President Biden will make the announcement during his visit to Syracuse, New York, to highlight a Chips and Science Act preliminary agreement with Micron to dramatically expand semiconductor manufacturing in the United States. The upstate New York region will be one of the 4 new workforce hubs, in addition to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the state of Michigan. I don't know what Senator Sanders is talking about, okay?
Yeah, Mike, what was Trump's working class agenda?
Tax cuts. Stimmies.
That's the part I don't get. Like, oh, Democrats. So wait, what did Trump exactly do that attracted the working class? Like, what? Tax on tips? No tax on tips? That's what. What?
You literally had no plan. No plan whatsoever.
Kamala Harris even incorporated that into her plan, and it's like, oh, okay, like, so like Donald Trump embraced the working class by like, having Elon Musk on the campaign trail. Like, I don't get any of this stuff.
Yeah, and how do you sell Trump is proclaimed to be a billionaire, but Elon Musk, all these billionaires around him, that's the working class? How does the working class, how do you attract the working class to vote for you by having billionaires on your ticket? Was Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt open a policy or something? I don't know. I mean, was that to demonstrate the strength of his fabric or something? I don't know.
Yeah, that, like I said, that's why this whole economics argument makes no sense. Of Dems, like you literally got one of the most progressive administrations and pro. Even the wages actually grew for the lower percent even faster, but like lower. I think it's like lower 30-40% of the income distribution. But Democrats abandoned the working class. This is. I just don't get it. He even said it. Cap the price of insulin at $35. Like, that's going to be going away.
Attack price gouging.
Yeah, like none of it makes sense from an economic standpoint. The argument.
Let me finish playing.
Didn't communicate that they understood Americans' pain. As a result, they came off as defending the status quo. And I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that Kamala Harris was asked repeatedly what she would do differently in this campaign, and pretty much said she didn't think anything needed to be done differently, and she didn't campaign on disruption or large-scale change. You seem to be suggesting that's at the heart of Trump's victory?
The point that I am making is that ordinary people are not stupid. They see what's going on in their own eyes. And if you're not even talking about the reality of what is going on, the reality of their lives, they go say, hey, no change is going to come. Why would I want to vote for a group of people who don't even acknowledge the reality? For example, you tell me, you follow these things.
I do.
We have today more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of this country. Did you hear a lot of discussion on that?
No.
We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people is a human right, and the only major country not to provide paid family and medical leave. Do you hear much discussion on that?
Not a...
Well, wait a second here. Isn't Trump the same guy who wants to abolish the Obamacare?
Yeah, ACA and replace it with concepts of a plan.
Unbelievable.
You have a whole billionaire who doesn't even hire people outside his own family members and people who are connected. And somehow we got to have this stupid argument about whether or not who abandoned the actual middle class. Okay. All right, man.
Yeah, white working class. Because once again, majority of black folks, like I think I sent you a video in the group chat, Mike, of like, hey, like this is the map of the US if like black voters were the electorate. This is the map if Hispanic voters were the electorate. You did have Hispanic men that broke for Trump, but you had Hispanic women who broke for Harris. So once again, we get into this argument about the quote unquote working class, and it's like, we need to be clear. It's really just the white working class we're talking about here.
Yeah. Even if all black people voted, we still would have slightly lost because of the white working class broke for Trump, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and another thing too, they said like, oh, this is the most diverse coalition. Like, Trump did not make major inroads. Like, from all this talk, they talked about, oh, black Americans, like, Trump got about the same, maybe like a point or two, depending, like, cause I guess they haven't gotten the full exit data. But like, it basically was unchanged from where it was in 2020. His only major inroads was with, like I said, Hispanic males.
And if his coalition, and if his reach is so diverse, then how come it's not showing up in his actual administration with jobs for diverse groups of people outside of white people? Man, fuck out of here.
And MOT, not even like it's qualified people either. So you can't even pull, we can't qualify. It's like, talk about Matt Gaetz for Attorney General and RFK for Health and Human Services.
And Tulsi Gabbard for Spy Chief of the whole United States. All right.
Like, yeah, exactly. But, somehow Ben Carson will end up over HUD or something like that, maybe. And it makes sense.
Not in this campaign. You got 20 million people in America today who are trying to get by on less than $15 an hour. Did you hear any serious discussion of the need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage?
I don't think we did.
Oh, missed that one too.
Why do you think, Senator Sanders, that Democrats didn't communicate an understanding of his pain? I mean, one of the ongoing critiques of the Democratic Party...
Well, wait a second here. Biden ran on that in his campaign.
Oh, man.
But Biden ran on that in his campaign. So how can you say that, Senator Sanders? He did that at the State of the Union speech in February, or was that January? February? And he ran on that from March all the way up until June, until he dropped out. Well, I don't get Senator Sanders at all.
I mean, but this is what I mean by the person who's from an actual major newspaper pretending like he's dumb and letting Sanders just go off with whatever his narrative is without challenging. And it's like, this is where you challenge him and be like, this is the numbers, these are the numbers. And it's like, the people who trusted a billion with no plan and no history did not pay attention to the end over end net jobs created, which is on Wikipedia, for every administration since Carter. And they chose the billionaire with the eating cats and dogs. Okay. All right, man. No institutional support from actual conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they chose on purpose because they didn't want a woman as president. Okay, got it. There's never been a time in American history where you have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican majority Supreme Court, and a Republican presidency that has not ended in absolute disaster and failure. And they're about to witness it yet again. All right.
Emerged since this election is that it is a party of elites captive to college-educated coastal America, and that it's not understanding and communicating this pain because it's not living that pain.
Well, that's only half of it. It is not beholden to college-educated people. That's the wrong word.
Okay.
It is beholden to the donors who put hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into it, and to the bloody consultants out there who will end up this campaign making zillions of dollars doing their 30-second TV ads, rather than figuring out how we talk reality to ordinary people and get them involved in the political process.
Senator, I want to talk about what Democrats did talk about in this last campaign, because I think it may get to a second element of your critique, aside from big money and aside from the question of whether Democrats failed to communicate an understanding of working class American pain. And in your second critique of Democrats in this moment was around identity. And I want to read what you said about identity politics. And just to define this phrase, identity politics, I think what you mean is a focus on racial identity, sexual identity, among others. This is what you said. You said, it's not just Kamala Harris. It's a Democratic Party which increasingly has become a party of identity politics, rather than understanding that the vast majority of people in this country are working class. This trend of workers leaving the Democratic Party, and you return to this theme, started with whites, and it has accelerated to Latinos and blacks. When I hear you say that, I hear you saying, and I want to make sure I'm interpreting it correctly, that the Democratic Party, including over the past year or so in this campaign, has turned off many working class Americans who feel that the way the Democratic Party, especially its leaders, talk about things like race and gender and trans people leaves them feeling alienated from that conversation, being policed and even scolded by it for not using the right words, for not accepting something like trans youth on sports teams. Is that what you mean?
Well, that's part of it, but I think the more important point is being ignored. Their needs are being ignored. And let me be very clear. Where the Democratic Party deserves a lot of credit over the last many decades is, in fact, leading the effort for women's rights. And we have come a long way until Roe v. Wade, as a matter of fact. And the Democratic Party deserves a lot of credit for fighting for civil rights, for fighting for gay rights, for fighting to end bigotry, all forms of bigotry in this country. Democrats were right on that struggle. But you can go forward in both directions. You can say, we are going to fight for a bigotry-free America. That's an ongoing struggle. We made progress, got a long way to go. But at the same time, we can stand up for the working class of this country, which, by the way, happens to be significantly African-American and Latino and women who are the bulk of the working class in this country. So it's not either or, it's going forward in both directions. That is a winner. Some of the Democrat pundits say, well, the problem is all of these Trump people are racist and they're sexist and they're homophobes. Well, no doubt that some of them are, and that's true. Most of them are not, and I suspect many of them actually voted for the first black president in American history, Barack Obama. All right? But they are, in large numbers, working class people, and we've got to speak to them in an economic perspective that is clear and straightforward.
I guess I'm a touch confused by the answer you just gave, because your quote about identity politics seemed to suggest that the Democratic Party's focus on identity is in some opposition to its ability to appeal to working class voters who may feel turned off about that. But then in your answer, I felt a little bit of a retreat from that understanding.
No, it's not a retreat. It's not a retreat. You can say, look, isn't it great that we have, in fact, a very smart and effective black woman who's on the Supreme Court? Great. But you don't hang your hat on that and say, hey, well, what you also want to do is talk about the reality of what's going on in the African-American community all over this country.
So it's a matter of communicating that perhaps the Democratic core values are things like diversity, but not to the exclusion of these central questions of economics.
It's not either or, it is both. And you have to decide what is the vision of the Democratic Party? Who's the Democratic Party taking on? You tell me, Michael. In this campaign, Donald Trump was taking on, every day there was another enemy out there, but by and large, the basic problem was millions of illegal immigrants coming in who were eating our cats and dogs, and they were the enemy. You're going to solve that problem, everything would be great. Who's the Democratic Party taking on in the campaign?
But let me stop you here. This doesn't make any sense. You're saying that the same people who are complaining about the price of milk and eggs and hash browns decided that eating cats and dogs was a campaign pitch that appealed to them enough to say Democrats have dropped the ball. I'm going to go over here where eating cats and dogs is the main course of the discussion. Really?
Okay, so you vote for a party who doesn't get who is the actual party of unrestricted corporate profits. So it's either these people don't understand the history, or they don't understand something because they voted for a person who's a billionaire, who's a fraudster, who did all types of things wrong, and they just wanted to have an easy victory. And I'm sorry, there was identity politics, white identity politics. That's what Trump ran on. That's what Trump won with. And now that this con man has been put in a position where he has to deliver on deportations, he has to deliver on fixing Israel overnight, who's about to give Vladimir Putin everything that he wants in Ukraine. So all of this easy overnight answer stuff, man, it's going to cause people a lot of pain.
Yeah.
I don't, it doesn't make any sense. And any person, like most of these, like you don't see the MAGA hats anymore. He's president. But other than these people on YouTube and social media, nobody's out here really saying that they voted for him. He just is the president.
Magically.
Yes.
Magically, 15 million votes are missing. Magically, they are. Renaissance man. All right, we'll move on.
Yeah, no, Mike, my bad. Couldn't get off you. No, to your point, MOT, they're gonna have to deliver. A lot of Trump's contradictions are gonna come, coming in clashing with reality. Like Elon Musk, his whole business model is depending on China, but Trump's talking about tariffs across the board for China. Isolationist foreign policy, but you're basically gonna get tough with China, which I'm like, wait, so you're going to basically trying to zero in on them as the number one threat to the United States, but then you're going to basically back away from the rest of the world and let these people have influence in the Middle East and Africa, Europe. It makes no sense. Same thing with deportation. People are complaining grocery prices are too high, but you're going to deport a bunch of immigrants who literally pick all of the fruits and and send those prices even higher. At some point you're gonna have to
right before planting season.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna go do all of that, and it's the only thing that may save you is, hey, people don't care. This guy pretty much had a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden, and that's pretty much why these people voted for him.
What was their explanation? What were they going to do to address the fact that so many people in America are struggling? Did it have anything to do with the greed of corporate America? The fact that you have a billionaire class today that wants it all, they want to own the political system? Does anyone really talk about the degree to which the people on top own this country and want more and more and could give a damn about ordinary Americans? Now, that is what I believe, unlike Trump. That's what I believe the cause of our problems are. I believe that we can create a nation in which all people have health care. All kids have good quality childcare. We have a strong public education system. I believe we can do that. But we're not going to do it unless we are able to take on the big money interests who want to use this economy to make themselves even richer than they are right now. That is the defining issue.
To go back just a second, you seem very clear on the idea that the Democratic Party can be a party that embraces diversity as a core value, and even elements of what you described as identity politics. But I just wonder if you can grapple with the reality that Donald Trump's message in opposition to things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, holding it up as a boogeyman and suggesting that it is unfair and that Democrats want to bring that unfairness and make it more and more central to the country's identity, seem to resonate in this election.
Well, it resonates within the context of Democrats not recognizing the pain that ordinary people are feeling and taking on the people who caused that pain and rallying people around an agenda that works for them. You can't fight something with nothing. You got to have an alternative vision. Trump had his vision. It was incorrect. It was dishonest. It was in many cases.
Yeah. Here's the thing about DEI. A lot of people don't even they just think DEI and they think black people. And I'm like, here's the thing. DEI has so many different things on the umbrella. First of all, 80% of DEI officers are white, in corporate America. That's the first thing. Second thing, under DEI, you have women's empowerment. You obviously have black folks, but you have things like disability rights, as well as even veterans. That's a big one, because what was happening 20 years ago, people were not hiring veterans. They would think, these people are suffering from PTSD, all of these things. You fast forward now, every company has a military veterans ERG. They have all sorts of programs to help people get jobs coming out of the military into all these corporate spaces. All of that is under the banner of DEI, but people don't even realize that. They just, oh, DEI, black people, so that must be bad.
And not just black people, but unqualified black people, which is interesting because the people that he's picking to be in his cabinet right now, Trump, are the DEI, quote unquote, didn't
white
earn
DEI.
it. Yeah, white DEI, right? They didn't earn it, right? All these people unqualified to be in the positions that they're in. They don't have any problem with that. It's just all the black people who suddenly that is the problem, and we have to get rid of it because all the wokeness in the military, right? But the real wokeness is in the cabinet of Trump's picks right now.
Yeah,
Cases.
I mean, and how they wanted to fight the billionaire class is by putting a billionaire in charge, and he doesn't see that for some reason. He's talking about fighting billionaires. So how do you fight billionaires when you got multitudes of them on his cabinet? When you got Elon Musk who's going to be cutting things for working class people. Like, all right, man. All right, okay.
The same Donald Trump and Elon Musk who are laughing about firing union workers, but they're for the working class. Make it make sense.
Unbelievable.
Racist and sexist. He had a vision. He had an explanation. To my view, Democrats really did not.
We'll be right back. I want to press a little bit further into this question of Democratic leadership being out of touch with the working class and not meeting voters where they are. You started to clearly articulate this when you criticized the Democrats for not appreciating and communicating the pain of America's working class. But another element of this emerging Democratic critique since Election Day is that Democrats have drawn what some are saying is unnecessary lines in the sand about where they go to have this conversation in the first place. When you were a candidate for president, you had no problem going on shows like Joe Rogan's. He ended up backing you for president in 2016. And in this campaign, Joe Rogan invited all the candidates on his show. Donald Trump said yes. J.D. Vance said yes. Tens of millions of people saw it. Vice President Harris declined that invitation to go on the show. We suspect in part because they worried about blowback from Democrats who don't like Rogan. They think he's insensitive. He's not one of them. And since then, we found out some voters viewed that Rogan interview with Trump as kind of decisive in their decision to vote for Trump. Are Democrats writing off too many places and too many mediums in this moment and making a mistake in their ability to reach working class voters where they are?
Well, funny you asked that, Michael. I am thinking back to when I ran for president in 2020, and I did an interview with the New York Times. You work for the New York Times,
I
right?
do.
And we did an interview with the editorial board of the New York Times, of which I think they gave each member, 20 members or so, I don't remember, 2 votes apiece, right? I was either ahead or in second place in the polls at that time. And of the 40 votes that were cast, I got one of the votes. That was what the New York Times thought of my campaign. And yet here I am on your show as an employee of the New York Times. Am I afraid of being on your show? I am not. Am I afraid of being on Joe Rogan's show? No. Bottom line is, what every communications director knows is that there is a new world of media out there. And it's not just NBC, CBS, or the New York Times. It is podcasts, it is Joe Rogan, it is Fox News, it is young people who nobody in the Democratic leadership has ever heard of, who have YouTube programs that attract millions of people. That is the reality. Can you ignore that? That is insane. Anyone who thinks you could ignore that reality is crazy. In my experience, not that I've been on millions of these shows, the people that I talk to treat me with respect. And I think you cannot be, oh, Joe Rogan said this or he says that. Yeah, so what? My wife disagrees with me on this or that issue. So what? You can't run away from somebody because they may have said something stupid or something that you disagree with. That's life. But most importantly, when you go on the show, what do you say? So Joe Rogan asked you, what do you think about the fact that we have
See, here's the thing I don't get. Like, first of all, it's like she did podcasts. She did All the Smoke. She did Shannon Sharp. She did Call Her Daddy. Like, she did all of these. She was doing that, and people in the media.
Joe Rogan didn't want her on the program. Like, how are you a media person and you don't know that? I mean, it was broadcasted on CNN. And Joe Rogan said that he did not want her on. He would not go to the demands. He didn't really say what the demands were. Just didn't have her on.
And not only that, MOT, he also endorsed RFK Jr. in August.
Yeah, and then he endorsed Trump right after. Like, I'm just like, here's the thing, like, if you thought the Joe Rogan interview was decisive, you were never voting for Kamala Harris with Trump, because that was like, I didn't even listen to it in its entirety, but like the parts I did, it was just like 3 hours of rambling. Like,
it was direct rambling, just like his campaign. But it was 3 hours of him sitting there just mumbling, just mumble rapping his way through stuff, man. And it's like, man.
But that was it's decisive for you. Like, I just don't, like I said, a lot of like she went on all of these platforms when she was doing the podcast. People were like, "Oh, she's ducking interviews because she can't interview. She can't handle the big interviews." Then she did the Brett Baer interview and embarrassed him so much he had to apologize for playing the wrong clip. Like, and it had the highest ratings Fox has had in like 4 years. So like, none of this is lining up with reality. So what? Kamala Harris lost the election because she didn't go on Joe Rogan. Like, that's what we're saying.
And not only that, but she went on the Breakfast Club several times, if I remember correctly. And that's the largest show in America in the morning show.
Yeah, she did the one-on-one with Charlamagne. Yeah.
So I don't. A podcast can't determine whether or not you win or lose an election. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's crazy talk. Yeah,
that just doesn't work like that. And so I don't know where this notion is coming from that somehow, some way, it sort of sounds like a manosphere talking point, right? Oh man, you ain't hit the link. Pull up on the panel. I don't. It sort of sounds like to me like Kamala should have been on StreamYards or something like that.
More income and wealth inequality than ever before.
Like she should have hit the link.
I can't answer that question. What do you think about the fact that we're the only major country not to guarantee health care?
Say it again.
I'd like to not talk about how I don't offend the insurance companies. Why are we paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Well, I can't talk about that because I get money from the pharma. That's the problem. So yeah, you got to go on different outlets. Of course you do. But most importantly, you got to know what you believe and what you're prepared to fight for and what your vision for the future of this country is.
Do you think that the Democratic Party is really prepared to go where it needs to go in taking the lessons that you're laying out here and really moving ahead with them? I don't know if you know that former Speaker Nancy Pelosi came on a podcast by our colleague, Lulu Garcia-Navarro, and was presented with your critique, word for word, of the Democratic Party. And if I can put it politely, she dismissed it and said, well, I completely disagree with what he's saying. By the way, Kamala Harris did better than, Senator Sanders in Vermont on Election Day. She pointed out you've lost your races for president in Democratic primaries.
Well, I tell you, I got 63% of the vote. I didn't spend one nickel on advertising in Vermont. How's that? Look, I respect Nancy, and we've known each other for years, and we've worked together on some issues like the American Rescue Plan, which I thought was a very consequential piece of legislation. But, Nancy and I have different visions as to the future. I think Nancy's views may reverberate here inside the Beltway. I'm sure a lot of the pundits and the consultants and politicians agree with Nancy. I suspect if you go out into the hinterlands, you'll find that most people agree with me.
Senator, looking forward to not just the idea that the party will take what you're saying and perhaps run with it, but that it needs to be embodied in a candidate who can win. When you close your eyes and think of who can lead the party out of this very decisive and for many Democrats devastating loss, what do you see? Not necessarily who do you see. I mean, maybe there is a who in your mind, but what is that future candidate?
Look, it's a candidate, preferably, but not necessarily, somebody from the working class who can speak to working class people, who will fight to end all forms of bigotry in this country, but is mostly prepared to take on the big money interests who today have an unprecedented level of economic and political power. With the advent of all the new technologies out there, Michael, in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of robotics, etc., we truthfully have the capability now of creating a society where all of our people have a decent standard of living. Yeah, we can actually wipe out poverty. We don't need to have people sleeping out on the streets. The question is, who will control the utilization of that technology and who will benefit from it? So we need to have somebody who primarily is prepared to stand up to the ruling class of America and say, you know what? We like your entrepreneurial capabilities, but you got to control your greed. You can no longer have it all. You're going to be an important part of the future, but you're not going to own and control the future. We need somebody like that.
Do you think that if Democrats do meet voters where they are and connect with the pain, and they pitch the kind of progressive policies that you're advocating for here, especially on economics, that is the winning combination? Or has trust in the Democratic Party, for a lot of reasons we've been talking about here, been strained, if not broken, in a way that means that even getting it right here is not really possible?
Well, that's a very good question.
Because there's been a huge loss of faith in government.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're right on that. And I will tell you that even within the confines of the Democratic caucus, and I don't talk about things that happen behind closed doors, but you'll have Democrats, U.S. senators standing up and saying, you know what, they hate us out there.
Us, the government, or the party?
Well, they hate the party, and they understand, and you're onto another issue, which we don't have time to get into right now. Even when government does the right thing, you got a bureaucracy, which is so slow in implementation of policy that people don't see it when they should be seeing it. But that's a whole other issue. It's
another issue and perhaps another conversation, but if people don't have faith in government, how do your solutions, which do require a tremendous role for our government, how do you sell them?
Well, that's again, a good question. And I think here's where we're at. The Elon Musks of the world will say, look, government can't do anything. It's got to be the private sector.
Cut it is his message, right?
Right. And look, Elon Musk is a very, very aggressive and capable business person. Very impressive with what he's accomplished. And he says, I could do more in a week than the government can do in 5 years. In some ways, he is right. The problem is, at the end of his efforts, he ends up making zillions of dollars, and working class people are not any better off. All right. The alternative is to say, oh, let the government do it right now, but you've got a government that is inefficient and bureaucratic.
Right.
So people are looking and say, all right, we've got the greed of the ruling class. They do things pretty well, but they end up with all the money, and the working class ends up with the lowest standard of living than they used to have. Or you got a government which is very slow in doing anything. So that is, it seems to me, where we are as a nation. We got to do better than that. What's the answer? The answer is to bring young people into government who believe in a mission to improve the lives of people, whether you work in the post office, whether you work in the Veterans Administration, whether you work in Social Security. Pay these people well, give them good management, let them be proud of the important work that they do. No more important work in this country than being a public school teacher, all right?
Wait a second, man.
So you correct all this by putting billionaires in the government.
That's what I'm saying. Elon Musk is exactly the person that you're talking about, right? This guy who's going to make $1 zillion and not give two F's about the environment and all the things that you're saying that voters, the reason why they didn't come out for Harris and they came out, or they didn't come out for Democrats and they came out for MAGA. That's exactly who MAGA is. MAGA Incorporated consists of those very elements. So how do you
somebody was going to
that?
build 3 million homes to bring down housing costs, and the other person had concept of a plan. This isn't secret. It was said on national TV.
No, MOT. The other person, his idea is, hey, if he deports all these illegals, they've somehow got all the housing stock. So once they're deported, there'll be houses for everybody.
Yeah.
And there'll be jobs for everybody. Too bad they didn't take those jobs before these people got here. Like, this is what I mean. Like, whenever you have people talking about immigration, and it's like, if you're having an HB1 visa conversation, okay. And these people always have these ubiquitous things about all these jobs that these Latinos are taking away from people. It's not that. It's the pressure that they're here and they're doing better than you. That's the problem. The pressure is that they're actually here and they're working. That's what these people see. That's what whites see. That's what these new rural sounding black people see, because they think if these people just disappeared, there'll be more housing and there'll be less cost of food and all this. I'm like, that's not how none of this works. But you still have to argue to get them off the cliff, and even if you did bring them up to speed, they're just going to turn around and go for the other guy. So,
yeah.
I don't know what.
Right, and while not getting anything out of that other guy.
Yeah, we underpaid those
Everyone
teachers.
had all of these positions. Everyone had all these positions. Everybody was posturing. Everybody was talking about tangibles. But as soon as the vote count came in, all those people turned tail and ran. They didn't even attempt to try to push the project. The Platinum Plan 2.0, there was no contract with Black America being pushed on Trump. None of that stuff. All those people turned tail and ran. Every single one of them. From the conscious community to the pro-blacks to the actual ADOS, FDA, all those people dropped all that stuff once the vote count came. Which let me know that actually not having tangibles as an outcome is the actual whole point of all these. Is to not actually move anything.
Yeah. The other thing too, like about the government piece, I'm just like we've heard this rhetoric before of like, 90s deregulation of the financial sector. Oh, government's in the way, the private sector can do all this. And, less than 10 years later, you end up with like one of the worst financial crises in United States history. It's just like we not learned anything from this. And like the thing with government too, I was looking at a chart. Like if you actually look at the size of government, like it really has not changed too much in like size versus like the actual amount of people since like the 60s. So if anything, if you're talking about it slow and bureaucratic, it's like, yeah, you have one party that literally has a philosophy of just like starve the government. And hey, we don't want the government to do anything to be productive and actually be efficient in anything it does because, hey, that would actually like improve the lives of mainly non-white black folks, and you know how that goes. So hey, let's be anti-government here. I mean, You start with the IRS. Biden put like $40 billion in the IRS, and they were talking about how many multimillionaires were just going by like just not paying taxes at all. Like the money to actually go after enforcement and like have dollar for dollar tax relief because you actually have enforcement. Not to mention now, in more, not in every state, but in a lot of states, you can file your taxes electronically directly with the government. You don't even need a TurboTax.
Yeah, and the thing here is what they found with that IRS investigation is that Black people are more likely to be audited than anybody else.
Exactly. Yes.
And here's the other thing that actually no one is talking about. When you privatize government, it gets more expensive. So,
yes,
were we really trying to save money, or what's going on here? Like, doing all this business exclusively with Elon Musk isn't to save money; it's to make him money.
Exactly.
Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, it's MOT. It's so, hey, I can get a cut off the top, and then we can have the services. Because here's what happened. If you do go and cut people and try to privatize it, all they're going to do is literally go and hire those exact same people to a private company and then charge private rates. And it's going to be for profit, so it's going to be more expensive.
And those people cash out their pensions early, or else they go on their military pensions while they're still working. That's why they love privatization of government actual services, so that way they can go off and retire right away and come back and do the same government job in a private person. So now they're withdrawing their pension and making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Somehow the government's supposed to be ran cheap. And they didn't want to pay the $30, maybe $40 a month for a union. They definitely take those extra dollars when it comes from a private corporation. And it's like, these are the people talking about saving money. This going to services. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that, and they can pretty much get rid of any sort of protections from firing. They can get you up out of there, especially if you're a Black person. You know, you don't have any of the hiring preferences, and they can get you up out of there pretty quickly if you're in the private sector.
And defunding the EEOC and getting rid of that.
Yep.
Let's close this out.
Working conditions. Choice has got to be to modernize government, make government work for ordinary people. Healthcare for all is a human right. If other countries around the world can have national healthcare programs, so can the United States of America. We're not dumber than other people.
I have a final question for you.
Yeah.
When Trump won last time, many Democrats organized themselves into what was loosely described, sometimes by them, as the resistance. That resistance, many Democrats now think, ended up pushing the party further and further to the left, leading to things like a primary in 2020 in which people like Kamala Harris made commitments to left-wing causes that came back to haunt her and made it possible.
Well, now you're on to another. Michael,
no,
you're dead wrong.
This is my final question. Do you worry that the party could be heading down that path again of
Michael, you haven't heard a
left-
word that I said. And that's impressive. You know, it's the things that Kamala was talking about, the things that I was talking about. Every one of those issues is enormously popular. Is that what you're talking about?
No. I mean on social issues.
Oh, I don't know. You know, social issues, I don't know.
Yeah, setting Kamala aside, I think what you're about to tell me is, Michael, many of the economic issues on the left are very popular with many Americans as economic policy.
Yeah, we uphold them all. In Missouri, you may have followed in this election, Missouri, a conservative state, 58% of the people voted to raise the minimum wage. Oh, by the way, we haven't been able to do that here in a democratically controlled
when those
US
policies
Senate.
were in isolation on the ballot, separate from a Democratic Party and candidate carrying all the baggage that we're talking about here.
Well, the point is, if Democrats were focusing on those issues and saying, gee, how come not one Republican wants to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour? How come one Republican doesn't believe that healthcare is a human right? How come one Republican doesn't want to expand Social Security so that the elderly people can live their lives with dignity? You put them on the defensive. But when you don't offer anything, you are on the defensive.
But that's exactly what Kamala Harris said about Trump. They wanted that Republicans, MAGA, wanted to cut Social Security. No one responded.
And he keeps pretending like this what he said the previous administration and the previous administration before that. Like there ain't history. Like a lot of this stuff is on people who voted for Trump who don't understand the history economically about who they just voted for and what they just voted for. The actual dream team of list. And it's like people think that we're about to go from incompetent government to incompetent people. Why do you think he's hired incompetent people? So that way they can be ordered around to do illegal things under the guise of, yeah, well, this is a good idea. Well, this is the actual act of the presidency. And yeah, and it's like all these people wanted things to run better, but you elected people who don't even care to run things better. And you got all these black dudes post hoc after the actual election count is actually counted. You know, no talk about black boys. You really ain't got women anywhere in this administration like that other than Kristi Noem, the actual chief of staff of Trump. So you can't blame the women now. It's time for you to go out here, be organized, and get things better than what the previous administration have done. And there are no call, no shoot. Why? Progress is being stopped. And that's what they're here. It's what they stop the work. So that's just where we at, man.
Right. I mean, it's worth saying that many of those Missouri voters voted for those progressive economic policies as ballot measures and then turned around and voted for Trump, which means it's deeper than policy.
Well, maybe next time we'll go into that. No, it's not deeper than policy.
Senator, I know you have to go. I don't know if you've been thinking about this, but you're 83. And
Thanks, Michael. I did know that. See, this is a perceptive New York Times investigative report.
There we go. But running for president, depending on the moment and the candidate, can be a very age-defying question. And you still sound like a candidate for president to me. I mean, is it totally out of the question?
Yeah. Yes, I don't think the American people want a president who's 104 years of age. So, you know.
You'd be 87.
All right. Well, no, the answer is I would say it's, you know, I'm very proud that the people of Vermont in very large numbers reelected me for a fourth term. I'm very proud of that. And that's where we are. All right.
Senator, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Let me give my closing thoughts on this. I think that Senator Sanders had sour grapes because he was not at the head of the ticket. He was not even talked about as a, you know, being one of the initial drivers of these, you know, the leftist movement, so to speak, right? He's not the darling anymore. This isn't 2016. This isn't even 2020. This is 2024. Your time has come and gone, and all the advice that you're given, it sounds great, but if it didn't work for you, it probably isn't going to work for Kamala either, and no one else on the future ticket come 2026 and 2028. I just think that you should go and finish your term and, you know, let the chips fall where they may. Renaissance?
Yeah, this is unreal. I mean, like I said, I think Bernie's just trying to get in front of the message, try to make sure the party doesn't move too far to the right, just because, you know, he's branded himself as, you know, on the left, but none of it lines up with reality. Like, you know, we've had this conversation, you know, plenty of times of, you know, economic anxiety and, you know, people abandoning the working class, and it doesn't line up at all. Like, whatever the message, whatever the we don't know whatever the association is. You know, the Democratic Party is basically seen as, you know, the party of black people, the party of, you know, minorities. And that's why you see people like, you know, when put in front of them on a ticket of like, oh, okay, I want to raise the minimum wage, they'll do that. But then it's like, you know, I don't want to vote for the Democratic Party because, you know, it's the party of woke and all these other things. You know, it had a black woman at the top of the ticket. You know, you had Obama who won twice at the top of the ticket. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think that's what this really is that, you know, a lot of this is racial animus, racism, sexism. I do think one thing that hurt that was not related to that was, you know, Biden staying in the race so long, getting out so late. Because you basically had 100 days where, you know, if you're Kamala Harris, you had to inherit the campaign of Biden's campaign. You couldn't move to headquarters. You couldn't really shake the staff up too much. You just had to kind of bring your people on there. You had to pick a VP. You had to do a convention. You know, you had to go and basically campaign and barnstorm all these other states. So, you know, that's a lot to ask for a candidate in 100 days. So I think she did a great job there. But, you know, I think that also worked against her. But like I said, I think the fact that, you know, she was a black woman, you know, she had all the policies every time they asked for something, be it, you know, an agenda on this. Oh, we don't see any economic policy, you know, comes out with an 82-page, you know, economic policy. And then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, Trump has really no policy that he's really released, you know, saying all sorts of crazy things, you know, has this big rally in Madison Square Garden, you know, trashing pretty much anyone non-white, and guy ends up winning. I think we know what this is. So
MOT.
I mean, for me, these people are going to feel the pain of what they just voted for. And if you don't know the history, you're going to ever be lost. because you don't elect Republicans to all branches of government if you care about economic things moving forward. There's going to be three things that's going to sink this economy: tariffs, deportation, and actually tax cuts. All three of those things is going to destroy this actual economy. And you can see it coming over the horizon. So these people who don't ask the Republican Party for anything, who didn't even ask the Republican Party to do anything legislatively when they had the House, they asked them to do nothing. All the things that, while inflation was going down because the first 2 years of Biden had nothing to do with why the Republican Party was in there, the last two things. At the end of the day, these people are about to feel the pain, and it's all their fault. I'm sorry, man. At the end of the day, if you're not going to read the history or understand the actual things, you're going to keep running into the same issues. You love our policies, you just don't like the party. So now you want to believe that you're going to get Democratic things out of Republican people? That's never been their history, ever. So I guess we got to keep going through this. I don't trust this election. They say one thing in polls and they turn around and they do something completely different because of their goddamn feelings and not facts and not history. I don't know what to do with this. Let's move to a blue area in a blue state. That's where I'm going to stay. Thanks for having me.
Indeed. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on the way out, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust.